If you take care of your boat, when the going gets rough, your boat will take care of you. This may save your life or that of a loved one. This is Captain's Log, and we'll be right back.
This is Captain's Log with your host, Captain Mark Gray. Welcome aboard.
Catalina yachts are time-tested and a sailor's choice, with over 50,000 boats made with pride in the USA. The nation's largest builder of sailboats invites you to call for free literature and a Catalina dealer in your area. Call 1-818-884-7700. Begin sailing your dream boat into reality today.
Catalina never up.
Please welcome our guest, Mr. Chuck Stanton of Anchor's Way Marine.
Thank you.
Well, Chuck, for the new boat owner, Anchor's Way Marine, by the way, is a boat yard, or what is referred to as a boat yard. And if I were a new boat owner or someone that had never touched a boat, could you explain to them a definition of what a boat yard is and does?
Well, a boat yard, I kind of think, is a body shop for boats. It takes care of your engine, takes care of your hull sides, your rigging if you happen to be a sailboat. It has people that are professionally trained to do shipwright work and carpentry on the interior, the electrical work, almost anything that would come up that needs repair on a boat. That's what a full-service boat yard does, and that's what Anchor's Way Marine does.
If you say full service, then I would imagine there is a self-service. Could you explain the difference between that?
You're right, Mark. Most yards have a do-it-yourself or self-service part of their business. And the way this works is that the owner can contract with the yard to rent space in the yard, which includes electrical, air, fresh water, a ladder, something like that. And then in the case of Anchor's Way, it's $1 a foot per day. So if you had a 30-foot boat, we would charge you $30 a day to rent a space, and you could work on the boat yourself. If you get stuck on something, let's say you're trying to change a bearing or you're having a problem taking your prop off, if you ask the people in the yard, then they will do the jobs that you're not capable of doing or you don't have the time to do. Or should you get discouraged, then they'll pick up where you left off and finish the job. So it's kind of an opportunity to learn to work on your own boat, to draw on the knowledge of people that do this for a living, and through that you can learn pretty much by emulating what they do and buying the materials that they use, do the same kind of work on a do-it-yourself basis. And you can save a little bit of money that way.
Do you know approximately the cost difference for, say, painting your bottom on a 22-foot boat versus having it done?
Yeah, it varies from yard to yard, but what you're really doing here is you're saving the labor. That's what you're saving. And you'll save a little bit on materials because you can go out and buy through mail-order marine stores, through discount marine stores, and get real good prices on paint. Whereas a yard may give you a moderate discount, you can probably do better on discounts by buying your own materials. So you'll save a little bit on materials, you'll save all the labor. What do you trade off for that? You trade off the lay-day charges that the yard will bill you for the time that you're in the yard. So a boat yard could put a bottom on a 30-foot or 40-foot boat round trip in about 3 days. 1 day to let the boat dry out, 1 day to paint it, and the third day to put it in the water. A do-it-yourself owner that's knowledgeable can do the same thing. Mm-hmm. One that isn't, he may take a week. and the clock is running, so it may turn out to be a wash. So, you know, you have to pick the jobs that you want to do, that you can do yourself, and then the ones that you can't do, let the yard take care of it. And of course, when the yard's working on the boat, then there's no lay charges.
Right, I did that with my boat, brought it in and had it surveyed all at one time in a 24-hour period, painted the bottom myself, but the things that were found to be wrong on the survey, such as packing bearings and shafts and all that, I let the yard do. Because
That
I
would
don't,
be the right way to do it.
I feel that they're an expert, and also the liability factor that should, you know, they do something and it doesn't come out right, they will pull the boat up and fix it
That's
for
right.
free, whereas I would have to pay if I did
That's
it.
right. That's a good point. If you get into something like a through-hull fitting or a valve's not being a difficult item, but through-hull fittings and packing or some kind of machinery redesign, the yard's responsible for that work. And should it go badly, should there be a leak, then the yard has to rehaul a boat and fix the work. If you did it, then it's on your ticket. You pay for the rehaul, you pay for the rework. So.
Well, I understand that we have a slideshow, and I wonder if we could go to that now and have you watch the monitor and explain it to our
Sure.
viewers.
What I did here is I took some pictures over the years of some horror stories that show up in the yard. This boat here was an explosion at sea. The owner had illegal starter and alternator on the boat. It ignited a gasoline fumes, and the boat blew up. The insurance company didn't pay off on that job, incidentally, because of the illegal parts to his engine. They were not marine parts. The surveyor discovered it, and his claim was history. See, there's not much left of it. This is a drunk driver that hit the breakwater in Ventura Harbor, flipped the bayliner over, took the bottom and the stern out, and fortunately he didn't hurt himself too much. But the boat was towed in upside down to the yard. We hauled it out and scrapped it. This is an interior of a sailboat where the alcohol stove overflowed, ignited, and burnt the entire inside of the boat out. The headliner, the curtains, it ignited the curtains and burnt the whole boat. As you can see, there's nothing left inside. This guy just went out in a little bit too much wind. But again, it's a judgment call. He shouldn't have been out there in the first place.
Yeah, I think we all get caught out there when it picks up sometimes.
This fellow didn't understand how to run his controls. You know, it's a good argument for taking a course in boating. He went in forward instead of reverse and tangled with a piling and took out the port bow. So that was quite a bit of damage, about $4,000. This is what boating's really all about. You see? So I thought I'd throw something in that's a little pleasant.
Well, it's always good to have something nice, like a moral of the story that saves
The
a
moral
life
of the story
after
is
the bad stuff.
don't drive a boat drunk, I guess.
And take your time and get the proper training and pick
Right.
the weather.
Right.
You know, really, the further out you're going, the more cautious and more experienced you should be.
That's
But
right.
I've seen a lot of people get killed just a mile or two offshore. You know, get in the water and can't get back to shore, and, you know, they're gone. And that's the end of that.
Well, it's a simple one in that case. If your engine should ever fail and you are in close to shore, remember you do have an anchor. You know, that's how a lot of people get in trouble. They don't throw the anchor overboard soon enough. You know, if the engine dies, you can always check the engine again after you've anchored. But it's hard to check the engine after you're in the surf line.
Well, I know that you do find yourself in a situation where you fall overboard, and I mean, you don't perhaps, and I
Yeah.
don't perhaps, but some people will out there, quite a few, to where they invite the girlfriend along that has no sailing experience, and they fall overboard or go overboard for a purpose, one purpose or another, and wind comes up, takes the boat away, and they find themselves in a bad or horrible situation. So it does happen quite a bit. What would you say the most types of boat injuries are that come to you? Is it drunken driving or bad
I mean,
pilots of the ship?
how a boat's...
Numbers
if the
wise.
boat's damaged, what's the most common occurrence? Grounding.
Grounding?
Running the boat aground. You got to have at least enough water so that the boat will float. It's not made to go on dry land.
Now, would that be mostly power or sail?
Power
With it-
and
with it,
sail.
yeah.
Power boats, it's usually the propellers. We get in too close to the riprap in a harbor and touch a blade, or they're anchored in the islands and the boat, the anchor drags a little bit and they don't realize how shallow they're in, and when they make their turn to get out, they ground out the props. Sailboats, they draw a little bit more water, and they can ground almost anywhere where it's shallow water. It's a good idea to know where you are. It's a good idea to have a depth finder and also a chart that tells you the water depth, because it's kind of difficult to see just how deep the water is.
Okay, we'll be right back after this with Beauchamp Moshan, our boating fashion segment.
Our first suit is being shown by Diane Burlington. It's featured at Ventura Bikini. It's a raisin roll down. It has sportswear to go with it, a nice blouse. It also comes with pants and shorts. The roll down is the most popular suit of the season. You can roll it up, be completely covered, or roll it down. This has a butterfly top, which is very secure. It comes in quite a few different patterns and colors. Very nice suit. Thank you very much, Diane. Our next suit is being worn by Johanna De Hoya. It's an Island Girl suit. She has made this suit famous. She is the cover girl for Island Girl. What's nice about this suit is the slide in the front. You can keep it very small for sun tanning, or you can spread it apart in the front for when you want to be very active. The top with the twist, it stays in place very well, and it can come in up to 4 different colors on the top. Thank you, Johanna. Our next suit is being worn by Kathy Delano. It's a La Blanca. This suit is a very chic suit. You can wear it with a black wrap skirt, and you can get away with it for evening wear. Very secure with the deep V, and very nice secured with the back with the crisscross. Michelle Picard is wearing a mini skirt by Raisin with a matching bandeau top. It comes also with a tank top, pair of shorts, long pants, really quite a few different things with this Raisin collection. Thank you, Michelle. And back to you.
Thank you, Donna. Beauchamp Moshan was sponsored and coordinated by Donna Russell of Ventura Bikini. Now back to Mr. Chuck Stanton of Edgar's Way Marine. And I have a question for you, okay?
What's that?
There's certain types of maintenance that you seem to be talking about where the guy smashes his boat up and he has to come into you.
Yeah,
Is there
like the hospital,
a
so to
normal,
speak.
yeah, hospital type emergency stuff. Is there a normal maintenance program, and how involved is that? And, you know, like how long?
Well, it's not very involved, actually. And a lot of it's common sense. To answer your question, yeah, there is a normal maintenance program. A boat cycle in the water is about, well, racing boats 12 months, cruising boats 18 months to 2 years, power boats 18 months to 2 years, where the boat is hauled and inspected and a new coat of bottom paint put on. Now, if you're in salt water, that has to be done, and if you're in fresh water, it's not quite that important. In that cycle, let's call it an 18-month cycle, you've got a couple of things you should be doing. Your oil changes should be somewhat regular. I kind of recommend every 100 hours or at least once a season. That includes the filters, the fuel filters on the engine. That would be the minimum maintenance that you would give your engine. On top of that, you probably ought to be checking your oil level every time you start the engine, and you ought to run the engine a week to 10 days to be sure that not a lot of salts are building up in it. As far as the hull and machinery are concerned, you ought to exercise all your valves, open them and close them.
For instance, where would these valves be? I mean,
well,
for the new boater.
You're a boater, you ought to know
yeah,
where the valves are.
You see, we're talking for new boaters, people that we hope to encourage to come in.
Like the sink, like a boat's like a mobile home or a camper truck. It has a sink, it has a marine head or a bathroom, it has a little vanity which probably has a sink. The engine has a raw water inlet valve. All these drains are intake valves. Intakes have a valve and a through hull that go through the side of the vessel. And these are very susceptible to corrosion, to clogging from marine life if they're not moved. If they're open and closed periodically, they more or less keep themselves clean. So this is something that you would do on a regular basis. A lot of people don't do that. There's the cockpit drain valves. Whenever water, or rainwater especially, gets in the cockpit, the drain valves are always left open. No one ever thinks to close them, and they freeze up almost all the time. People forget to do that. So that's something that,
And then they come
we
to
have
you
to replace.
for
The
the
valve is
hospital.
frozen.
Yeah.
The surveyor finds that situation. The reason you need a valve is should a line or a hose in the boat fail, you've got to be able to close the valve and prevent the water from coming in. It's
And
as
if you
simple
haven't
as that.
turned it for a year, it may
You
not
won't turn it
close.
then, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
And you're going to be in real big problems.
So the valves are important. Your pumps are important. You've got, on a large boat, a 40-footer, you've got maybe a forward bilge pump, an aft bilge pump. You've got a raw water pump on the engine. All these pumps have seals in them. They all have hoses connected to them. You should check your hose clamp. The Coast Guard requires that they be double clamped these days, but the hose clamps should be tight and they shouldn't be rusted. The pumps should work. And if you don't exercise them when they're not needed, when you do need them,
They go out.
they go out.
Yeah.
That's right.
I've seen a lot of situations where the engine will start right up. You think everything's running great, you know, your bilge pumps, everything. The minute you get out there a mile or two, they're fatigued enough to where they just go because they've been let sit
They've
for
been
quite
let
a while.
sit. On the electrical side, you got your running lights. You should burn those in, turn them on and leave them on for 10 minutes or so while you're in the dock during the day. And
Is
then,
that once a week or?
no, I'd say probably once every couple of months. If you're going on an extended cruise, then you probably ought to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be out there changing a running light. And some running lights, like the range light on a sailboat, is about 30 feet in the air. So a lot of people don't like to go up a mast to do that. It's easier to do in the dock. What else would you maintain? But anyway, my point is, once owning a boat, and there are books written on this if you want to talk about regular maintenance, but it's pretty obvious to the boat owner and the new boat owner what he should be doing on a regular basis to keep the boat workable.
Well, it seems like there's quite a bit to know for the new guy coming in that has never bought a boat, thinks he buys it, takes it out in the water, goes to Channel Islands, and he goes, well, I'm only going a little ways. And
Okay, well, I don't think he first should go out to the Channel Islands when he buys a new boat. He ought to stick in the harbors and close to shore. But on top of that, there's the Coast Guard Auxiliary, there's the Power Squadron, there's probably classes in high school, in navigation. Certain marine stores put on navigation courses or piloting courses. There's any number of courses that he can take are fine. He can take these courses before he even buys a boat.
right, and
See?
indeed,
And that'll help a lot.
it does help. The academics is very important, but to acquire practical experience, I agree with you. Play around the harbor, test the boat, see if something will fail. You know, go out a little bit further and you know, get your sea legs, so to speak. We do have the Power Squadron and Coast Guard Auxiliary coming on, you know, other shows. And it is very life-saving type information and education. In a moment, we'll be back from Sea Tales, the segment of our show where we tell true boating stories that may save your life or that of a loved one. We'll be right back. This is the Sea Tales segment of our show where we illustrate through true stories how people have gotten into a bad situation, perhaps survived or not, and what we could do or you can do to better prevent getting into that situation or making it more survivable. Rather than tell a particular story, due to the fact that you do work at the boatyard, and when there's a bad wind out there and the seas are bad, you might see 10 or 20 people come in at one time that have had problems.
Let's hope it's not at one time.
Yeah, at one time or close, from a bad storm, which we do have quite a few out here. And could you illustrate a typical day that's a bad day?
Yeah,
recent
Mark.
one.
A couple of weeks ago, we had some high winds. It blew. There's a lot of sea stories involved, and I wasn't out. I took a look at the weather, and the ocean was all popcorn, and I decided that wasn't a day to go sailing, so I didn't go out. But a lot of people, this was Memorial Day weekend, in fact, went to the islands, and they were caught out there. So some of them decided, instead of staying in a safe harbor, if there were any out there at that time, to make it on back. And I'd like to give you the the synopsis of events of 4 or 5 boats that in that one afternoon that got into difficulty. The first boat lost a rudder. Now this points up a situation where the fellow is a personal friend of mine, and had complained over the years that he thought his rudder was cracked. Turned out he was right. The rudder broke off in about 15-foot seas. The Coast Guard had to tow him into Channel Islands, and it was a very hairy event for he and his wife. There were only 2 people on board because he couldn't steer the boat. There was no way that he could steer the boat. And the Coast Guard ended up putting a drogue out, and it was a little nerve-rattling for him. The second boat lost a mast. Well, when I finally went over to see the damage, the mast had broken in 2, but the real problem was not the wind. The rigging on that particular sailboat, which is a 27-footer, was very old, very corroded, and when one wire goes, chances are all of them going to go. And that's what happened. It broke a forward lower, and that was enough to weaken the rig, and the mast fell down. Another boat, this is a good one.
Wait, did anyone get hurt in those?
No, no one got hurt. No one got hurt. No. This is just some of the things that went on
in one day
because people weren't thinking in one day. In this one afternoon, where the wind was in the neighborhood of 35 knots, which is pretty stiff breeze. This fellow had a brand new Ericsson 32. He had owned it 2 weeks. He loaned it to his friends. They took it to the islands for the weekend and brought it back with the bow all chewed up because they couldn't figure out how to get the anchor up in high weather. With the stern quarter railing torn off because they backed over a stern line and got it caught in the rub rail and ripped that off. And while they were backing, they backed into another boat, and they bent up the stern pulpit and the boarding ladder that goes over the stern, and also damaged another vessel. So the moral of that story is, if you loan your boat to somebody, ask them if they've taken a course in seamanship before you do. He was really heartbroken. And it's probably about $2,000 worth of damage to repair that.
And a lot of angry neighbors.
Well, and probably a broken friendship.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's really bummed out that his new boat is now, not new anymore. Let's see, that's 3. 4? I don't know. I think I've run out of stories.
I know of a couple that I heard on the radio. I know the day of which you're speaking because it's recent. There was a 22-foot bayliner that had a man and a woman on board and 3 children, and their engine had gone dead. I guess they tried to start the engine until the batteries went dead, therefore they didn't have a radio, and they didn't have a reserve radio, so another man called in to call for them. And they were in 8-foot seas, 8 seconds apart, and the winds were, as you say, 25, 35 knots. What happened was the Coast Guard came up and had to take the children off the boat because it was breaking up as they tried to tow the boat in. And they dropped one of the children somehow because, it will happen in rough seas. You have to imagine the boats are rocking about tremendously, and one of the children fell between the 2 boats. Fortunately, they got the child up, without being injured or killed, which, you could be crushed quite easily. And I think the whole moral of the story is that, it might cause a divorce. Definitely the guy wants to get rid of the boat for whatever, the damage or whatever. Get rid of it cheap, you might say. And that's, of course, just the reports that I've heard on the incident. But there is a tremendous amount of problems that come up on a bad day.
I think that's what you have to plan for. You have to plan for the worst scenario. And people don't. They plan for what they see in the brochure, which is a nice sunny afternoon, calm seas, fair breezes. And at any moment, it can change. The wind can come up, the fog can come in, the seas can build because of something that's coming down the channel that we're not aware of. And you're not going to get that information on the weather.
And it happens instantly. So
that's right.
I guess the moral of the story is, do practice man overboard drills on that sunny day instead of just going out having fun. Jump overboard and rescue each other, but do it safely and go through your drills. This has been Captain's Log. I hope that perhaps we can save a life, your life, or that of a loved one through these shows. My name is Mark Gray, and we'll see you next time.